Welcome to Resume Well. We're exposing the intersection of wellness, woo, and work. We've been told that the antidote to professional burnout is personal wellness, and sometimes that means confronting our inner skeptic and exploring the taboo anyway. This season, we're all about putting our intuition to work at work. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to Resume Well. Today, we are here with a very special food expert, Llance Kezner, and he is at the helm of Keep Life Tasty. Who doesn't want to talk to somebody who has a company named Keep Life Tasty? Llance and his wife, Lori, have transformed personal family legacies into award-winning food products that do more than just tantalize taste buds. They help people manage stress and anxiety through thoughtful nutrition. As a creative force behind multiple Specialty Food Association award winners, including Millie's Sipping Broth, which we're going to talk about today, Auntie Gretchen's Water Essence, Betty's Seasoning Blends, AJ's Veggie Shots, Garlic It, I love that. This couple has built a plant-based, unsweetened product line that is exceptional, and you can find it across specialty retail, grocery, food service, and in corporate wellness programs. So I'm so excited to talk to Llance and learn all about Millie's Sipping Broth and a bunch of other things, including entrepreneurship, family business, wellness, and all of the things. So Llance, thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, Courtney. It's wonderful to be here. And thank you so much for that incredible introduction. That was amazing. I hope I live up to that.
I'm sure you will. So I like to start off by asking every guest, if you're at a dinner party, let's say you and Lori are out at a dinner party full of acquaintances, maybe you've met them, maybe you haven't seen them in a long time, and somebody comes up to you and asks you, what do you do? What would your response be?
I think that the easiest thing is to say we make innovative food products that help people relax and de-stress during the day. That would be my answer.
Mm-hmm. And what do people usually respond to that with? Like, oh my God, that's so cool, or where can I get it?
Well, basically, in the past, I've always been impressed with people who answer something that's with a little more of a vagueness, because you instantly know whether the person you're talking to is actually interested in talking to you, because they'll follow up with a question.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not interested in talking to you, they won't follow up with a question, and I don't want to talk to them. And that's what connected my wife and I together, is that we had an interest in talking to each other. And we grade people that we meet by how interested they are in asking us. So usually people will follow up with, what is that? What does that mean? And then it launches into what we talk about with all of the things that we've made.
Yeah, that is so interesting. So I used to do recruiting, and I worked with my dad. And one of the first kind of tips he gave me when I was looking at resumes for a position, we would grade them. We would give them A, Bs, and Cs. And like anybody who wasn't an A obviously was not a great candidate. So that's funny. I relate to grading people based on an interaction that you have with them. Let's go back, because I think I've never had anybody on the show who has done anything like this in terms of like creating their own food product. I don't think I've even had a chef on, and which is weird because I know a lot of chefs. I want to go back to when you were a kid. What were your interests, and what did you want to be when you grew up?
I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My father and mother had their own business. And so I was in an environment of, I would say, a little bit of chaos. I didn't know about some of the chaos that was going on. I just thought these things were normal. So in my life, going to work with my parents, literally at 3 months old or whatever, being in a shopping cart in their store, that's how it started. And they were in the import business. And back in the 70s, when I grew up, you could smell the stuff that had come off the ships. You could smell the seawater and the fragrances of the items they were importing. They were in the floral business. And so from a very early age, that type of environment is what I grew up in. And so when I was younger, I didn't really have a concept of what I wanted to do necessarily, but I did have a concept of knowing that from a very early age, whether it was being at work with my parents in their office, or my dad every year would sell Christmas trees, and he
Oh.
would have me there helping him sell. I knew that that was just part of normal. Being self-reliant, and I knew whatever I was going to do, that I would have to rely on myself, because that was just part of how I was brought up.
hmm Do you feel like you had any kind of external pressure to become an entrepreneur or to not go into working for somebody else because you grew up in an entrepreneurial atmosphere?
There probably was a little bit. I wouldn't say pressure. There was an expectation that my father had, that I would follow him, and we did. I ended up working with him, but I also knew that I needed to get experience outside of him, and I think he respected that. But I did have a couple of jobs before we ended up working together, and the most I ever learned was working with him, good and bad. And I think that, and then we ended up not working together after that. Family businesses are difficult. And I think he was a little upset about that. But I think that I always knew that I was going to eventually do something on my own. And Lori also, I think she was very supportive in that too, because she had that mindset as well. When your parents are always telling you, work for yourself, don't rely on anyone else on an ongoing basis, it's hard to not have that influence.
Yeah, have that kind of always going on in the background. So I want to get into Millie's, but I also want to know, what did you study? Did you go to school for food science? How did you end up in this food creation business?
Yeah, all of my experience had nothing to do with food.
Okay.
And Lori too. So Lori, we both went to the University of Washington. Lori became a teacher, and I got a degree in political science, and decided that, that was great, but I still like selling, and got into the tech business. So we're here in Bellevue, Washington, just down the street from Microsoft. A lot of tech, influence going on here. So that was, my background before we got into the food business.
So what happened that made you switch?
The economic downturn of 2009 really forced Lori and I to evaluate what was going on. I lost my job. She was still teaching, but we looked at our passions and thought, let's make something of some of the ideas that we had. Let's create our own business out of this, and give it a go. And we played around with different ideas, but one of the things that we started with was a garlic condiment that we created in our kitchen that we use for our own cooking. And that's what we started with. We decided to take it to a co-packer, co-manufacturing facility, get it made, and see if the market, wanted it. And that's how we started.
So so that's where I get really interested, because I think a lot of people have these ideas, whether it's food related or just, as a parent, like with kids, you're like, oh, this, like, I should invent this thing, because I need it. And it stops there. So how did you figure out, we have this really great idea, we use it in our kitchen. How did you figure out the path to getting it, mass produced and in stores?
Since we didn't have experience, what I realized is that we needed to talk to people in the industry and get some sort of insights. So one of the very first meetings I had with somebody who had come from Costco, he said to me, don't make the item that you're proposing to sell. And it was probably the best piece of advice that I ever got, because our expertise was not in that. Our expertise was in creating something that nobody had ever seen before.
Mhm.
And so that requires so much effort and so much time to develop, to sell, to market, and all those things. And that is a completely different discipline than making the item. And
Mhm.
so once he had told me that, I realized that I really needed to find a way to separate the innovation from the operational side of things. And then that kind of set forward a path and helped us decide on how to scale our manufacturing, how to scale our sales, and all those types of things. So we used that as a guiding light, and we still do that today.
That's really interesting. And it is a really good piece of advice because I think people get locked into that, like, I need to make 100 million, samples and have it all inventory ready to go if somebody says yes. I think that is because those are two very different, like you said, like operational and innovation. Like those are two very different components. So it's really interesting. What was the breaking point, or I should say your big break in terms of, getting somebody interested in the first one, which I think that was a garlic it.
Yeah, garlic it. Yeah, yeah. We
Great name. I love it.
yeah. Thank you. Garlic it. Yes,
Yeah.
the L is capitalized. Garlic it. Yeah. So again, we had no experience. We were messing around. The only guidance we had was the co-packer. He was like a 75-year-old guy who used to work for Green Giant and started his own business. And he was just like this, total, very salty character who was very brutal with his lessons, but listen to everything he said. A year and a half after we created it, we won Outstanding Product of the Year at the Fancy Food Show in New York. We didn't know what happened to us. We didn't know what that meant. We got featured on the front cover of Specialty Food magazine. It was crazy. It was like drinking from a fire hose. That was the break. And it forced, okay, so imagine these people who created this funny thing in their kitchen and didn't know what they were doing. And then all of a sudden getting all of this attention worldwide, getting on the front cover of the magazine. And so that had good and bad things come at us.
Yeah.
The bad things were that we had opportunities come to us that we didn't know about, and they just passed us by because the people realized that we weren't ready for anything really big. And I look at that as the good thing, because if we had like a massive company come to us and say, okay, we're going to place an order for this product and we want it in 3,000 stores, it would have bankrupted us. We would have
Right.
not been ready. We didn't have the learning or the resources at that time to deal with that. So we were forced to deal with an early success that led us to learning really about the entire industry. And it was an amazing opportunity that a lot of people don't get. And we took it very seriously and shaped our company and the innovations we came up with after Garlic It to really fit better into the industry that we were proposing to get into.
Yeah, it's almost like baptism by fire, where you're just completely submerged in it. And it's such a great, honestly, I think that is something that a lot of entrepreneurs need to hear, because a lot of the time you're not ready for the next step and you just have to do it and take it in stride, which it seems like that's what you guys were able to do successfully. So what happened after? So you had Garlic It, and then you got a rough education there, and then you were ready. Then you were more prepared for the next product. So what did you decide to do with that knowledge? And now that you had resources and a brand and all of that.
Yeah, I think the thing that we were making the product, we were learning, we had customers, we knew what it was like to get feedback from the end user, the end customer who was actually eating our product, right? We knew a little bit about some of the wholesale accounts that what they were looking for and that kind of thing. And then we knew a little bit about manufacturing. The problem with the product, it was such a niche that we realized, and it was glass and it was heavy, and we realized that there were some downsides to this. So we were always on the lookout for something that was light, high value, innovative, that nobody had ever seen before. And we had not quit our day jobs. I mean, both Lori and I were working. Yeah. So I found another job. Lori was still working. We were still working and doing this on the side. So Lori was a teacher, or she was teaching at the time. And during the day between classes, one of the things that she needed was to take a break and have something savory that wasn't going to wreck her appetite and wasn't like all the leftover cakes and cookies that were in the teacher's room.
Oh my gosh, I hear that. I have friends that are teachers, and like, oh man, there's always such unhealthy
you want to
food
bring
everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to bring it and get rid of it. You don't want to throw it away. Let everyone else eat it. So she used to bring a bouillon cube with her to school to kind of have, because tea and coffee wasn't going to do it. She wanted something savory and hot, and there was nothing out on the market that satisfied that. And she told me about this, and I said, let me make something for you that's healthier, that's not as much sodium, that's real ingredients, because a bouillon cube is not real. And so she said, okay. And so I took herbs and vegetables and seasoning, and I put it in a cup with hot water. And she said, this tastes great, but it's like all over the place. Well, can you put all the ingredients in a tea bag? So she and I ripped open Lipton tea bags, took all the stuff, put it inside, staple it back together. I think we made like 10 of them. And she took them to work, and then she put a few of them in the break room. She came back and they were all gone.
Oh my gosh.
And she told me, and I said, oh boy, I think we have something. And that's the initial spark for this idea.
Yeah, the bouillon cube really, really hits home with me. We always had them at home, and my dad would always, it was just like a comfort thing for him, I think. We were from Boston, so it was always cold, and the winters were always cold. And I remember when I was in 4th grade, he would send us to school with thermos of broth. And I always thought I was like the weird kid because nobody else did that. But I loved it. It was so like comforting, like you say. And it scratches that kind of savory craving without being unhealthy, like chips or something like that. Yeah, so I totally get it. I love broth, and I love savory stuff. So I completely understand the craving. So what happened next? So you had it all together. You knew you had an idea. You had this, rough draft of the garlic it. Did you just follow the same path, or did you, was it a different, because it was such a different product, did you have to, do something totally different?
Let's put it this way. We followed the path that we had learned. And so there were a couple of things that we knew that we needed to do. If we were going to take this seriously, we needed to first get it into other people's mouths, get their feedback as quickly as possible. We needed to figure out a way to get people to buy it as quickly as possible. And we needed to find someone to make it for us. And so all three of those things were, we were doing those simultaneously. So I think we got from, the kitchen idea to getting it into people's mouths probably within 3 months. We did a Kickstarter campaign.
Okay.
And that helped fund, the initial manufacturing, getting actual people to buy it that we didn't know, right? They weren't our friends.
Right.
Telling us what we wanted to hear. And then helping to solidify some of our ideas. And so that was the next step. Then we ended up going and we had a booth at the Pike Place Market here in Seattle, across the street. Literally, it was on the street, across the street from the original Starbucks.
I was going to say
And
Pike
so
Place. That sounds so familiar. It's a Starbucks.
yeah, exactly.
Roast, yeah.
And they throw fish at you at the market and all this kind of stuff. And so it's a huge tourist destination. And so we thought, well, let's see people buy it. And we were there during the summer. So we're, on 80 and 90-degree days selling
You're
broth.
hot broth. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And people were buying it. They were intrigued. Now, was it an instant success? No. We had early designs of our artwork and packaging, but the one thing that it did do is it forced us to have a pitch that literally needed to connect with people within 5 seconds.
Right.
It was a one sentence pitch that had to engage people, and we got to try it out hundreds and hundreds of times.
What is the phrase that you guys practiced over and over again?
Millie's sipping broth is broth in a teabag. That's it. And that would connect that. Yeah. They would go, what? And then it's, back to your original question when, go to a party, right? You want to give them just enough to get them on the precipice of wanting to ask more.
That in and of itself is so perfect, because a lot of, if you don't have a marketing background, like I don't have a marketing background, I have a lot of trouble coming up with, like a 4-word pitch that will do exactly what you're talking about. So that it's so clear and so obvious, like it paints the exact picture in your head of the exact product, which is all you want to do with those 5 seconds, right?
Yeah, and what I just said to you with those few words took us literally thousands of tries to get it right, and to test and to see what connected with people and what was evocative, what did it paint an idea in someone's mind that would be, oh, I want to know more, or that sounds like the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, and most of the time people would say, that's genius. Why didn't I think of that? And that's when we knew that we had the right messaging, the right words to describe. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Was this around the time like bone broth got really popular? Like, okay, so
yes. Yeah. It was exactly around. It was about the same time, and we bought the domain sippingbroth.com very early on. Right. There was a company in New York called Brodo, which was the first, like if you walked up and got a cup of bone broth, at their location. And they started about 6 months after we started our booth at the Pike Place Market. And then and then also at the same time, we had a really big company decide to compete with us. They copied all of our flavors and decided to launch. They launched it in Whole Foods, but they did two things that helped us learn from their mistakes. The very first name that we had for our product was Millie's Savory Teas. We thought it was a savory tea, right? Mm-hmm. And we thought, oh, people will be interested in that. And so that company also did savory teas. But there were two problems with it. Number one, the savory tea part, and this was because of all the interactions we had at the market, people would go, ooh, yuck. Tea that tastes like soup? What are you guys talking about? This is terrible. And we kept getting that feedback. And then the second problem that they had is that they didn't put any seasoning in their broth, and it tasted like boiled vegetable water. So they basically failed very quickly. And we looked at that and thought, oh, we need to change our product name to Millie's Sipping Broth and call it Broth. And then also we knew that our recipes were the winning flavor. And so we leaned into that heavily. And then they discontinued their their
Oh, wow.
line, and then we continued. They failed very fast, but then we learned from that, really
Yeah.
from their attempt to copy us, and we learned where to pivot. And so we were very, very lucky in that respect.
Yeah, they did it for you, right?
Basically,
You
yeah.
didn't have to waste the time. Yeah. Okay. So I do want to talk a little bit about working with family. So you grew up pivoting a little bit, and then we'll come back to Millie's. But during all this time, you're working with your wife. So what is that like? Because I think a lot of husbands and wives had these ideas together, but working together is something completely different than just having an idea together or being married as, a couple. So I guess, let me ask you, what's the best part about working together, and what has been the biggest challenge about working together?
I think that the best part of working together is that we, if you have a job and you go away for, 8 hours a day, which is, a third of your day, and you're not together, there's a lot of stuff that goes on that, your partner doesn't know about. They don't know about the interactions you're having, the people you're dealing with. That's basically shaping your life. And, in our setup here, we know what's going on with each other all the time. All of the conversations we have, the interviews like I'm having with you, they are directly, connected to both of our lives as they are happening. Good news, bad news, problems, all of these things are hit us both, within almost real time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is probably the best thing that we have. We go on morning walks with our dog, and it's basically like a business meeting almost all the time, where we're talking about things, we're thinking about ways to solve a problem, we're thinking about strategies, that kind of thing. The downside is that it's sometimes hard to shut that off during the
Right.
day and at night.
Yeah.
And so last night, she wanted to relax with me, but I had to get this idea out of my head. So I spent 2 hours on my computer getting this thing done. And, I could tell that wasn't, it wasn't great. Yeah. She wanted,
Yeah.
she wanted me to shut everything off, but I had to get it out of my head. So that's you really have to be careful about dominating your life with your work.
Yeah. How have your different personalities and backgrounds worked in the business? So she was a teacher. Did you say you worked in software?
Yeah, I was in software
Yeah.
sales. Yeah.
Software sales. Yeah. So, sales, obviously, like, that makes sense. You're selling your product. But were there any other skills that she brought to the table that you were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is not something in my wheelhouse. Thank God she's here, and vice versa.
I think the thing that we both brought to the table was that we had no preconceived notions about the food business. And we've been doing this for almost 12 years and don't consider ourselves experts necessarily. And that helps us think out of the box, like big time.
Yeah.
So we will approach
Like, you're not so entrenched in it that you're just
Yeah, exactly. We're not, this is the only way that you do it kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Lori has a way of thinking about problems that are even farther outside of things than me. She's an artist. She's a teacher. She has a way of thinking about applications of ideas that she thought about putting broth in a teabag. It's a simple idea, but it really made sense, right? I didn't think about that. She did. So together, we both really have taken the best of our abilities. That doesn't mean that we know everything. And we definitely rely on outside help to make our business successful. We absolutely bring in experts when needed for certain things. But at the end of the responsibility of everything is up to us.
Mhm.
to figure things out. And that's great when it works out and not when it doesn't work out, but we're the ones that are responsible.
Yeah. If there are any husbands and wives or partners that are listening and they've been thinking about starting a business together, what's the one piece of advice you would give them from the get-go?
Don't quit your day job.
Ooh. Okay. So how long were you in that day job before you quit?
Almost five years. I mean, between the both of
You?
us.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And there were times where maybe I was working as a consultant, or maybe I had a job for a year or so. She was working also, even towards the end, she was a substitute because our time started getting compressed more and more.
Yeah.
We had both made the decision that we really wanted to, we needed to be as uncomfortable as possible before we made a leap to being a full-time in what we were doing. And we have a family, we had 2 boys, we have a house. These things were really important. And we knew that we didn't want to get in debt in order to pursue these things, because here's the test. The test is, will someone buy your product? Is your marketing message correct? Can you make a profit? Is it sustainable? These are all these things. That's why I say don't quit your day job, because you need to prove all these things as you're going forward. A lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to jump into it 100%. It'll work its way out. Wrong.
Yeah.
There are so many things that you can't imagine that are going to happen. And you need a comfortable base to carry you through. So that's why I always say that.
Yeah. So you're not making decisions out of desperation, right? So you're clear-headed. How old were your kids when you decided to go all in?
Let's see. So this was 12 years ago, 13 and 11.
Okay.
And and they both were involved up until just a couple of years ago. They were both involved in what we were doing, whether it was helping us sell at the market, go to trade shows. My oldest would be at a trade show booth, and I got him to sell. And there was a point where he would push me aside and say, I can take care of this. And I'll tell you, the older lady buyers would come in and they loved dealing with this 13-year-old who
cutie patootie
had all the answers. Oh my God. That was the best. It was the best.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's funny. I could see it happening. One thing I wanted to ask you that I thought was interesting, so as you were going around interviewing for a day job, right? Would you ever bring up this side hustle that you were doing, or was that kept under wraps?
It's interesting to bring that up, because sometimes I would bring it up, and I think it was a detriment to what I was doing, because I think when you're working for somebody else, you work for them.
Right. They want all of you, right?
They want all of you. And if you have aspirations, or if you have an independence that they can't control, depending on what the organization is, that's not good. When I was doing consulting, didn't matter, because all I was there to do was a function. And as long as I got the function done, they didn't care. So in those, I was very clear with them that I had a side thing going on. In fact, most of them were very supportive of that. And because I was effective in the task they were looking for.
Right.
You had to be careful about talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that a lot with friends and clients who had this idea for a business, but they are realistic and know that they need to have a job to get by. Do not mention the side business, because even though there are so many skills that come with it, like you said, it would be a very specific organization and position that would be okay with that, be okay with your attention elsewhere for a certain amount of time. So that's why I wanted to ask you. I also wanted to ask you so you said Lori's an artist. Was she an art teacher?
No, not an art teacher. She did have a formal education in art history, but then she got her teaching certificate at the University of Washington, her master's. But art has always been part of her life. I mean, since a very early age. In fact, there was a a funny story that her sister likes to tell where she applied to go into art school at a very young age, and the teacher had her draw something at home, and the teacher accused her mother of making the art, not Lori, because it was so
Wow.
good.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
And yeah, but art's always been part of her life. And we've incorporated that into whatever we can do. And yeah.
Yeah. My grandmother was an art teacher, so that's why I asked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, okay. Is there anything else that we didn't go over? Like, what's going on for you guys next? Do you have any big plans over the rest of, 2025? I feel like you do.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that, we started this idea 10 years ago. We got it. We went through COVID. We were discovered by Weight Watchers for our product because broth in a teabag ends up being 0 point. And broth in a teabag helped people during COVID. People went crazy on Weight Watchers because Weight Watchers partnered with us and started selling our product on their website. That went through. We became top selling vegetable broth on Amazon. And then we got discovered by Walmart. We had an opportunity to present our product to Walmart. They were looking for domestically made products. 7,000 brands were presented. They chose to meet with 800, 400 of them in person on their campus. And we got a deal the day that they met with us. And so
Wow.
70 companies, they got that deal. So we had to keep it completely secret for about a year. And then we just went into their stores just a few months ago, into half of their stores.
Wow.
So,
congratulations. That's huge.
Thank you.
That is huge.
Yeah. So before that, we were in about 600 stores. And with them and Sam's Club, we now are in 3,000. And so that is dramatically going from 600 to 3,000 in a year was like huge change to everything that we were like our daily lives totally impacted by that. Going forward, we want to stabilize. We don't want to like grow to a crazy number. We want to stabilize, get our product into more people's mouths, and make that a really stable base so that we can support Walmart. But the other thing that we're really focused on is getting our product into new arenas. Let's say company break rooms. Imagine going into a company break room and that's what Lori did, right? She went in and drank broth instead of reaching for Cheetos and cookies.
Also, I mean, I'm just looking at as a mom, just to give you I have 2 little kids. I have so many snacks and stuff in my bag, and we're always like going to different activities, and those are so portable. Like you could stop and get a hot water anywhere, like any coffee shop, right? That's phenomenal, especially like wintertime, everybody's sick. Like I think we had to reschedule this like maybe twice because everybody had the flu in my house like multiple times. So like moms would go for that.
Absolutely. People who are on dietary restrictions because of medical procedures.
Yeah.
Imagine this in a hospital, right? The salty water that they serve with meals, instead of getting that, you get Thai lemongrass broth that you make, right in front of you. You make it fresh. Imagine how good you would feel. Or if you're traveling on an airline and the beverage cart comes over and they say, do you want coffee, tea, or pho broth? What do you think? People are going to go, oh, I want to try that, right?
Yeah.
We need less caffeine and sugar in airline travel passengers' lives, right?
Also, it's actually funny as you're talking about this. I remember, I think it would be phenomenal in hospitals because when I was having both my kids, you're not allowed to eat anything once you get into the hospital. Like it's like popsicles, which I do not have a sweet tooth. So I was like, I don't like, this is disgusting. But especially with your first kid, labor can take a whole day. That would be phenomenal for maternity
to have
wards.
something.
I mean, just for electrolytes, for that, like something that doesn't taste like a sports drink, something healthy. I mean, so many. an amazing product. Is there anything else? I mean, what else other than the fact that you got into Walmart?
Yeah. And so our newest thing is that cafes and coffee shops now are realizing that a sipping broth is a not, they call it a not coffee, right? So it goes along as tea and cider and chai. For people who are looking for non-caffeinated, non-sugared hot drinks, especially with the GLP-1 drugs that are going out now where people are in constant nausea, they're always looking for new things to consume. And so coffee shops now are pulling our product in. We're really excited because we created a new category of hot beverage. We're really excited to see where this goes. And so far, keeping focus on the customer experience is the number one thing. Everything else that kind of comes out of it is exciting and cool, but the experience with the product, the quality of the ingredients we use, the making sure we have inventory, those are the things that are our day-to-day focus. And then telling everybody, like being on your podcast, about this cool idea. We hope that, everyone will want to try it out.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to go have some after we get out. But I have 3 really quick rapid fire questions for you. Very random, have nothing to do with Millie's. What is the best career advice you've ever been given?
Focus on skills that help you become self-reliant. Don't expect an employer to take care of you. Be ready for change because change is constant.
Right. What is the best relationship advice you've ever been given?
Make sure to have an open mind about what the other person is telling you and try to look at it from their perspective. And you may find out something about yourself.
That's great. Llance, thank you so much. This was so much fun. I think all of our audience is just going to love this. There's so many golden nuggets that you shared. And if you want to try Millie's sipping broth, please go to your local Walmart, and hopefully all other retailers will have it soon because I think it really deserves to be everywhere. So thank you so much, Llance.
Courtney, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Resume Well, where we explore the intersection of wellness, woo, and work. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends, family, and coworkers. Remember to follow us on Instagram at Courtney Austin Page and on LinkedIn either at Courtney Page or at Resume Recruiting and Development. Join us next week, and in the meantime, resume well in everything you do.